Climate change includes both global warming driven by human-induced emissions of greenhouse gases and the resulting large-scale shifts in weather patterns. Though there have been previous periods of climatic change, since the mid-20th century humans have had an unprecedented impact on Earth's climate system and caused change on a global scale. The largest driver of warming is the emission of greenhouse gases, of which more than 90% are carbon dioxide, and changes to land and ocean carbon sinks. Temperature rise on land is about twice the global average increase, leading to desert expansion and more common heat waves and wildfires. Temperature rise is also amplified in the Arctic, where it has contributed to melting permafrost, glacial retreat and sea ice loss. Warmer temperatures are increasing rates of evaporation, causing more intense storms and weather extremes. Impacts on ecosystems include the relocation or extinction of many species as their environment changes, most immediately in coral reefs, mountains, and the Arctic. Climate change threatens people with food insecurity, water scarcity, flooding, infectious diseases, extreme heat, economic losses, and displacement. These impacts have led the World Health Organization to call climate change the greatest threat to global health in the 21st century. Even if efforts to minimize future warming are successful, some effects will continue for centuries, including rising sea levels, rising ocean temperatures, and ocean acidification. Many of these impacts are already felt at the current level of warming, which is about 1.2 degrees Celsius and beyond. Additional warming also increases the risk of triggering critical thresholds called tipping points. Responding to climate change involves mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation, limiting climate change, consists of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and removing them from the atmosphere. Methods include the development and deployment of low-carbon energy sources such as wind and solar, a phase-out of coal, enhanced energy efficiency, reforestation, and forest preservation. Adaptation consists of adjusting to actual or expected climate, such as through improved coastline protection, better disaster management, assisted colonization, and the development of more resistant crops. Adaptation alone cannot avert the risk of severe, widespread and irreversible impacts. Under the 2015 Paris Agreement, nations collectively agreed to keep warming well under 2.0 degrees Celsius would require halving emissions by 2030 and achieving near zero emissions by 2050. The term global warming is not new. As early as the 1930s, scientists were concerned that increased carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuel could cause global warming, possibly to the point of eventually melting the ice caps and flooding coastal cities. Before the 1980s, when it was unclear whether warming by greenhouse gases would dominate aerosol-induced cooling, scientists often used the term inadvertent climate modification to refer to humankind's impact on the climate. In the 1980s, the terms global warming and climate change were popularized, the former referring only to increased surface warming, while the latter describes the full effect of greenhouse gases on the climate. Global warming became the most popular term after NASA climate scientist James Hansen used it in his 1988 testimony in the U.S. Senate. In the 2000s, the term climate change increased in popularity. Global warming usually refers to human-induced warming of the Earth system, whereas climate change can refer to natural as well as anthropogenic change. The two terms are often used interchangeably. Various scientists, politicians and media figures have adopted the terms climate crisis or climate emergency to talk about climate change, while using global heating instead of global warming. The policy editor-in-chief of The Guardian explained that they included this language in their editorial guidelines to ensure that we are being scientifically precise, while also communicating clearly with readers on this very important issue. Oxford Dictionary chose climate emergency as its word of the year in 2019 and defines the term as a situation in which urgent action is required to reduce or halt climate change and avoid potentially irreversible environmental damage resulting from it. Multiple independently produced instrumental datasets show that the climate system is warming. with the 2009 to 2018 decade being 0.93 plus or minus 0.07 degrees Celsius per decade, with 2020 reaching a temperature of 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial. Since 1950, the number of cold days and nights has decreased, and the number of warm days and nights has increased. There was little net warming between the 18th century and the mid-19th century. Climate proxies. Sources of climate information from natural archives such as trees and ice cores show that natural variations offset the early effects of the Industrial Revolution. Thermometer records began to provide glow,